Help protect us from racism and xenophobia by becoming an I Love Black People ambassador today. Join on iloveblackpeople.com. No matter where you are in the world, join us today and get access to the I Love Black People network. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of I Love Black People. And we're so grateful for everyone joining us and all your support and information, as well as questions that you ask us. And a lot of it helps us research and prepare. So thanks for the team that actually is behind us, and also all the folks listening to help us. I think one of the key things, I've been traveling lately, so I was literally in Europe for a few days as a layover, and then in Kenya and Johannesburg, South Africa. And while traveling, a lot of things were happening in the United States. U.S. President Biden had stepped down, and it looks like he's endorsed Kamala Harris. And I will just say Kamala Harris is also a Howard University graduate, historically Black college university. And I definitely know that when we discuss what we're doing here as a Pan-African tech startup, we're very clear to say that we're not waiting on elections to determine what we're going to do and how we're going to live and how we treat each other and how we treat ourselves and our community. So we're not waiting every 4 years or 5 years or whatever jurisdiction politically you live in. We're about how do we organize the African masses? How do we organize ourselves in a way through common interests to protect each other so that we can build a better world for everyone? And that being said, there are things that we can do as it relates to electoral politics. And I'm not here to say, well, let me just say this. I think one of the things in U.S. politics, and many people don't discuss, the United States, it came out of its apartheid in the 1960s. And if you contextualize that, South Africa came out of apartheid in 1990s, and Zimbabwe, where we have our other headquarters, came out of apartheid in 1980. Most African nations got their liberation in the 60s, and through either war itself or through political changes. And contextually, oftentimes, the status quo system, though, stayed in place. Those who controlled the means of production as well as the infrastructure remained the same, and went from a colonial government being operated outside of the country via UK, France, Portugal, many of these places. And then they basically privatized colonialism, where instead of it being a country, it was a series of companies that ultimately had their directors and boards directed by folks outside of the country. And in many ways, the changes that initially started, and this is, remember, we talk about African liberation, the 60s was the height, well, not the height, but a part of something called the Cold War, where there were literally two major systems vying for global domination. One, a capitalist system that was a evolution of a colonial system of exploitation, and another system through a socialist communist system, where literally vying for power to change what was going on through the capitalist system. Now, by 1989, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, we saw the changing of the communist parties, communist countries, which at that point were, many of them in Europe were part of what they call the Warsaw Pact. And there were, East Germany was divided at the time. it was Czechoslovakia at the time, Yugoslavia, and these countries at the end of the Cold War, which we normally say is 1989, they changed their economic systems from one of a socialist system where the means of production were controlled by the nation, as it were by the people. Uh, and even then, let's just be clear, those systems had uh, people who were siphoning off the benefits for a very small group of people also. So none of these systems were, some type of panacea. But I think one of the things that has trapped or made it difficult to advance currently is that the changes that we saw not only didn't materialize the benefits, but I think, in some ways bought into things that may not even help us. So when we look at the capitalist system and you look at disadvantage or circumstances where we're trying to retool, capitalism benefits, again, a handful of people, not the masses. And what colonialism did in ravaging our communities as well as apartheid, it actually drained us of our resources. And trying to use that same system to gather those resources back just may not be actually the most effective way of doing it. So I'm bringing up all these things because I'm really trying to say that even when you're talking about elections, if the systems that you're electing people to are inherently flawed or inherently oppressive, it doesn't matter what faces that you change. The system is problematic. And the system of capitalism, as we know it, has been very problematic. And even if it evolved from colonialism to what we have now, the exploitation of people for the interests of a handful of people is what we tend to see. And even in the politics, and I think we need to be clear that the politics that we participate in is by and large controlled by the corporations, by the corporate structure. So even when we talk about the electoral process, the resources used to campaign, the resources used to promote candidates uh, are derived from capitalists, from wealthy corporations, and in that way, then you start to see the connection where the people always say, "Follow the money," so you can actually see why the um, the changes that we are looking for oftentimes are stifled by politicians because those who actually controlling what's happening don't even live in our communities. And I think sometimes people don't realize, they think the electoral politics, somehow come from the people. But in many ways, the body of politics we live in have come from corporations themselves. And when we start looking at the colonial empire that was created through things like the British East India Company, which was a private company, which was colonizing literally the world. It then was taken over by the state, but literally we're still talking about corporations that are influencing and actually controlling the politicians, and not the politicians controlling the corporations. So I'm bringing these things up so that we can have better context of what's happening around us. So when by the time many people, no matter where they are in the world, including the United States, see who's a candidate that's actually running for office, someone else has actually picked that person. And it may not be as obvious as you think. Oftentimes, these people are picked by folks who have financial interests, and these people come and are basically groomed and told what what they should do and how they should do it, and given resources to help them. Now, there are plenty of situations where you have activists or people who truly believe in power to the people, and they start off from that perspective, but as they move forward through the electoral system, they realize they need resources to elevate their voice. And the best people with the best ideas, uh, it takes a lot of work to get the word out. Now, I'm not saying it takes, you know, billions or millions of dollars, but depending on the size of the jurisdiction, it does take money and effort. So even if it's just someone knocking on doors or telling their friends, the time they're doing that, they still got to have a way to pay their bills and be able to, maintain their particular lifestyle. How does one do that, and as well as campaign and organize? And those are some of the dilemmas that grassroots movements have, is how to garner the resources. And there's definitely um, many laws and different ways that people are given opportunities by having matching funds for their donors, to bolster their resources. Again, people often look at the size of the donations, and small donations with many people versus few donations with large from large donors. And of course, there's limits on how much people can contribute. But whatever we're doing with that electoral process, and I'm saying this is as the electorate or the folks who are running, we need to have agendas for ourselves. We're going to see people who've compromised running for office with these large moneyed interests. And these moneyed interests are doing this so that their agenda is fulfilled. We as the electorate, we as the folks who are going to vote, need to make sure we're clear about our agenda, not just on election day, which is just one day out of 365. We need to make sure that we have our agenda in mind every day we wake up. When we wake up in the morning, we need to be clear about what our intentions are and what it is that we are, moving towards or for. And sometimes that can get lost behind, again, a senses of so-called patriotism, party loyalty, a host of things. But to be candid, is one uh, one of the key issues of what is politics as we know it in this modern society. Walter Fauntroy, representative from Washington D.C. congressman, uh, spoke and said that politics determines who gets what and when. And if you don't have an agenda, you'll end up being a part of someone else's agenda, helping them determine how they get and what they get and when. And again, that doesn't mean we shouldn't. There's a word that uh, generationally we didn't grow up with, but intersectionalism, and we would call it, collaboration or what have you. It does. There's nothing wrong with someone having a slightly different agenda than yours, and then literally collectively working together. One of the things in the United States that's been discussed is there's a very conservative, racist think tank called the Heritage Foundation, the Heritage Group, and they have been putting together a platform called Project 2025. And a lot of people have been speaking out against it, and I'm sure there's people who speak for it. But one of the biggest things I try to impress upon people is that we got to have our own agendas. It is reasonable for one to critique another agenda, but then it begs the question: what is your agenda? And if you're working with people and you don't know their agenda, or they haven't shared it with you, then there's a problem, because the people you don't like aren't the only ones with an agenda. We got to be clear that anybody who's involved actively in politics is doing it for a reason. And loving and hating people is not a political strategy. Loving a politician or hating a politician is not a strategy. And it definitely is not an effective way to achieve goals for through an agenda. And as many enter a season and continue to enter seasons of politics, electoral politics, and I say electoral because there's politics anytime two people in the room. So the politics of human beings is something that's we all are part of. I say electoral politics because those are set rules with certain set deadlines and certain parameters. And legislative politics, passing laws, that is a specific process, and based on jurisdiction, they do it different ways. So I'm speaking about electoral politics, where literally people are being selected through the means that are set up in your jurisdiction to say who's going to take the tax dollars, who's going to take the interests of that political jurisdiction as defined by a city, a county, a state, province, and move forward in the interests of the people they represent. And remember, they represent people. So even if it's a mayor or city council, or they all are a reflection of a body of people who, through some process, selected them. And some people are appointed, some people are again go through a process where maybe a small body elects them, a committee or election committee, or as many people know in the United States, on the federal level, the president of the United States is elected by electoral college, which again is a step removed from a direct vote. Is not one person, one vote in the United States. This literally is broken up in a way that there's a system that operates between the actual voice of the people and the actual people who are elected. And in many ways, that system is not only antiquated, but it's again, it's they talk about threats to democracy. It's not democratic. So in many ways, it's one of those things where we need to organize ourselves outside of election cycles as well as inside election cycles to understand the system that we're working in and also understand our own personal agenda. Now, the other thing that I think happens also is that some of the negativity, and again, I think social media makes it easier, but we don't have to be disagreeable. Now, I'm not saying be weak. If you're clear that a genocide is taking place, let's be very clear. There's genocide taking place in like places like Gaza, but there are very, very serious-minded folks that see the murders and killing that's been taking place in the United States as it relates to African Americans, African people, that's a genocide, that our population has been under a violent attack since the inception and before the inception of the United States. And when we start talking about agendas and how do we stop this violence, that's consistently being perpetrated in our community, be it through government, state actors, or through private people using guns, it's something that's been prolific and targeted in certain communities. And one of those communities I would say would be again, the descendants of enslaved African people that we call Black folks in America. And the government has actually participated in that harm through the prison industrial complex, as well as through police terrorism. But at the same time, we have to make sure that that's key in our agenda, in our agendas. And I say agendas because each person has different agendas, and it's not, I think, reasonable to think that we are monolithic in the sense that we all have a number one priority and all have the same number two priority. We might have different priorities, but they still are all important to us, and we can collaborate with each other. And I think that collaboration should start off with a fundamental respect for each other. And oftentimes, these political conversations can cause people to be very personal, disrespectful. So when someone says, "Oh, you're not, conscious of what's going on," or you don't, you're being, you're gullible. When you start attacking people personally, there's no longer an opportunity. It makes it very difficult to have an opportunity about collaborating on a political agenda because, excuse me, you're offending people. And our humanity should be, number one. I mean, not as an agenda, but just as a way we interact with each other. Where literally you might have save the whales as your number one agenda. I might have youth gun violence as my number one, but save the whales might be my number 10. And youth gun violence might be your number 4. Well, whenever you get around to it, let's collaborate on youth gun violence. And whatever I get around to it, let's deal with these whales. It doesn't have to be, again, attack on each other, because that's the divide and rule that has been used by colonialism and by this current evolution of colonialism called that we call capitalism. It uses these legitimate sometimes differences to make people act in ways that are have nothing to do with their differences, but actually take personal attacks at each other. And again, one of the things that we're very clear about at I Love Black People is that we want to make sure we have a world that we can move about freely and safely without being harmed and humiliated by racism and Afrophobia. And we are clear at the definition. Afrophobia is the irrational fear or hatred of people perceived to be of African descent. And so when we talk about racism, we're clear that race is not real. It is a construct. It has no true scientific, genetic um, uh, validity as it relates to our differences. We're almost all alike. With that being said, racism is very real. And the consequences of racism are very deadly. And so we have to be very clear when we're in environments that powerful people want to make sure that people are divided, that we're not being used to, help someone's agenda that we're not aware of by taking personal attacks at people. And even within communities, again, I said, as Black people, as descendants of African descent, or however you define yourself, these are things that, again, we're all, trying to navigate life as people, and everyone deals with trauma differently. So, even with these identifiers of who people are, people say I'm not Black, I'm this, I'm that, and then they give themselves titles, or we're American, and this and that, or I'm from this country with a nationalistic identity, or even a tribal identity, which is probably more accurate in description of who people are based on culture. With that being said, that doesn't mean these differences should make us not be able to work together. I think the fact that we are different, all are different, is a beautiful thing. The question is, how do we navigate and collaborate through this world that has some status quo structural problems because of capitalism, because of legacy systems that are based on exploitation? And how do we organize ourselves in ways that actually makes our work more productive and efficient? So in doing that, that's the core of what we do at I Love Black People. We do it using technology to bring people together, to create a safety net, to identify safe places. But even in doing that, what we've heard from you is that you're not only wanting to identify safe places, you want to be able to be in community and discuss with other people who are like-minded and have common interests around a Pan-African collective that is focused on being safe. And we definitely, with our app, now have committees. Now, we initially had called them communities, where it is really a way that folks can chat on our app. But we realized we really want people to be serious with the work we're doing. It's not, there's plenty of apps and opportunities for just pure socializing for the sake of socializing. We've now organized our chat groups into committees because we really see these as the building blocks of taking action, actually moving forward on different agendas as our members come together. And we want to make sure that the conversations and the engagement is productive, not negative, not superfluous or frivolous. We want the work to be something serious. So we are literally in the process of now integrating information about for folks in the United States that are voting this cycle so they know where to vote and how to vote. And we think it's very important as a tech startup of being responsible to the communities that we serve, that we're literally providing the proper information for as many of our members to engage effectively in that. Now, again, as I started, we're not waiting for some politician to save us. They're not going to save us. We got to save ourselves. But with that being said, we need to use all the tools that are available. And when I hear people say they're not going to participate in votes, you know, I, everyone has a prerogative. If you vote or not, whoever's in these offices, the representative offices, they still represent you. Just know we're here and we're not going anywhere. And stay strong, stay encouraged. This is a incredible time to be alive. Love your family, love your friends, be engaged, have your own agendas. Just come up with a top 10 things that you see as important, for you and your communities. And then wherever you see people who are willing to collaborate or have ideas about that, definitely don't ever be afraid to reach out and touch someone in a way that allows you to learn more about what's going on and how you can be a part of the solution that you're looking for. With that being said, though, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're going to continue the good work, continue to give you updates about what's happening. Again, I Love Black People is global. We're talking about what's happening in the United States because, again, it does have very powerful implications in the world as well as for those locally. With that being said, I am because we are, and thank you.
Help protect us from racism and xenophobia by becoming an I Love Black People ambassador today. Join on iloveblackpeople.com. No matter where you are in the world, join us today and get access to the I Love Black People network. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.